let's bring up Ron Dunn, part 2.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning, guys. So Job chapter 3, verse 1 starts out with after this. So after what, right? So it was after Job had built a great, successful company. He grew a family. He grew respect. It was after there was this exchange in heaven where God was complimenting Job and saying, look at this man. He's blameless. He's upright. He fears me. He turns away from evil. And then Satan challenges back and says, for good reason, you just protect him, take that away, you'll find out maybe he's more like me than you think. Maybe he just loves the stuff you gave him and he doesn't really love you. And so God allows him to take the stuff. And in one day, Job loses everything. Okay, so this is after now a second exchange in heaven where God says, you see Job? Still blameless, still fears me, still worship me, even though you punished him without cause. And Satan challenges back and says, pound for pound, flesh for flesh. Touch his flesh and we'll see what happens. God allows it. So now this is after Job has had boils from head to toe, after his wife says, just curse God and die. And Job says to her, you're speaking like one of the foolish women, that's not you. Do we take good from God and not trouble? So now this is after Job, we don't know how long it's been, weeks, a month, maybe 2 months. He's outside the city in the garbage dump where they burn garbage. He's sitting in the ashes. What's he doing out there? Well, he had these boils, which were like a bacteria. And that day, if you had leprosy, if you had anything that was bacteria that could spread, that's where you went. Because that fire, they felt, would keep it from spreading. It would purify it, the air enough that other people wouldn't get it. So he's been sitting in the garbage dump, sitting in the ashes. God's been silent. Word spreads. 3 friends decide they're going to come sympathize with Job, provide him a little bit of comfort. They see him from a distance and they just start crying. And they rip their robes. And they're sitting with him for 7 days in total silence, seeing how much pain he's in. And then chapter 3. So let's look at it. Take your card, your table card, the first verse there. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Whoa. This is the same guy who in chapter 1, when he got hit, the way he got hit hard and fast, that he fell down shakah, arms outstretched, nose on the ground, knees on the ground, toes on the ground, and worship God. This is the same guy who told his wife, no, we'll accept bad and good. So what changed? Why in chapter 3 is he now cursing the day that he was born? Well, first let's talk about what didn't change, okay? What didn't change is he didn't curse God. Satan lost the bet. Satan lost the challenge. Job did not curse God. He's now at a point where he's cursing the day he was born. He does not understand what's happened. Satan's not in chapter 3. Satan lost. He was waiting for that curse word to come out and it wouldn't come. Satan lost. His probe was over, but God's probe is not done yet. Basically what God's saying, we've gone this far, let's just go the rest of the way. Let's go to the last 10%. Remember we talked about that at Encounter? Sometimes we'll come this far with God, but we don't go that last 10%. God knows there's something in Job that has to be pulled out. And so he remains silent for a little bit. Now, take note, in chapter 3, Job does nothing wrong. We're going to read, or we're going to highlight here quickly, this is one of the heaviest chapters in the Bible. This man is just pouring out his heart. And God, in no place does he chastise Job for this. When the exchange starts with his friends, which we're going to talk about the next time we meet on Job, something comes out of Job that God was trying to get to. But right here, there's nothing wrong with what's going on. So what does Job say? If you read chapter 3, I'm just going to summarize it. Basically, he asks 4 things. Why was I born? why was I even born? Why wasn't I still, why was I conceived? First he says, why was I born? Then he says, why was I even conceived? Then he says something, if there's anything humorous in this very heavy chapter, he says, let's get some guys that are good at cursing and curse the day I was conceived. Now, Job was blameless, upright, feared God, and turned away from evil. You want to pray something for yourself? God, help me be blameless and upright. Help me to fear you and help me to turn away from all evil, right? Job was not used to cursing. Have you ever been around someone that's good at cursing? I'll tell you a real quick aside. Ryan and I were invited to play golf at Greenbrier last year, and the guy who invited us said he was a personal friend of Lee Trevino, so we were going to play golf with Lee Trevino. And I said, Ryan, fat chance. Because the guy that we're golfing with tends to storytell a little bit, right? So the morning we're there, the head pro knocks on the door. We're getting ready to have breakfast at 7 o'clock, and he says, hey, Lee Trevino got up early. He's at the driving range waiting on you guys if you want to go. And Rick says, I'll catch up with him later. I said, I'll go. So Ryan and I jumped in the cart, and sure enough, you can see in the distance, Lee Trevino's down there hitting balls. So we get out of the cart, and from the minute I get out of the cart to the next 2 minutes when he was saying stuff, there was so much cussing going on. I was like, what on earth? It was like poetry almost. I mean, it's part of his language. And it's that way. I mean, now here's a guy that's good at cursing, right? So what Job is saying, let's bring in somebody good at cursing and curse the day I was conceived. And then he goes on to say, why wasn't I stillborn? If I was stillborn, I'd be in heaven right now. I'd be with the kings instead of here in these ashes, feeling all of this. And then he says to God, I don't get it. Why do you even allow people who suffer to keep living? Take a look at the second verse down. It's a pull from Job 3:20 and 25:26. Why is light given to him who suffers and light to the bitter of soul? What I have feared came upon me. I guess we all probably have that a little bit, right? We have our kids, we have our grandkids, and what do we sometimes fear? The worst, right? Something may happen someday. And so that fear kind of remains. You build your business, think, we hope we can keep this going. So Job says, what I feared the most came upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. And I'm not at rest, but turmoil comes. What is it, Job? What is with Job? He's depressed. He's been beaten down. His whole life has fallen apart. He's heavy-hearted, he's hurting. But he's also hungry to know why this happened. The worst suffering that we have is when we're suffering, we don't know why it happened, right? And he's asking God, why? Why did I even exist, but God is silent? Now, in our little circle here, there's a lot of us can relate to some of this, okay? When we moved here, my daughter was 9. She got a shot for MMR, right? Measles, mumps, rubella. Well, she was one of the unusual kids who, instead of taking that on and building an immune system against it, all those viruses started attacking her body. And I watched my little girl, who was athletic, outgoing, funny, just start withering into a ball. We took her to Scottish Rite. The doctors didn't know what to do with her. Had to leave her at the hospital. Another child came in, died from it. And I was driving to work just screaming out to God, what on earth? Why? Why did this happen? What is going? Take that from her. Give it to me. What are you doing? Sometimes we just don't know, right? In our circle here, we've had the death of a grandson, drowning in a swimming pool. The death of a son-in-law, right after a baby's born. A baby's not even a year old. The death of a son. We've had failed businesses, loss of job, can't get a new job, divorce. The stuff's real, right? And so what do? When we're under the hardest time, we find out who we really are. How do we react? Job is crying out and saying, I don't get it. What's the sense of all this? Why is this happening? Good question? Yeah. Good question to ask God, right? You know, Spurgeon said that the same sun that melts wax hardens clay. How do we react to God when we don't understand what he's doing? God's allowing this to continue on for a little bit to find out, okay, Job, I'm leaving you in the ashes. I'm leaving you with your boils. I know you just buried your kid, all 10 of them. I know that. But we're going to get to something here. And so Job is just crying out, why? Why is this? What exactly is Job asking? Okay, I brought the rope back because I think it illustrates pretty well. Plus, our cost per usage goes down every time we use it. So if you haven't seen the rope before, the rope demonstrates timeline. Okay, so look at it as the timeline of our life. So this rope that I have in my hand goes up here, down and out the front door. So picture it going down windward out here, out west, all the way out to California, on to Japan, wrap around Earth a couple times, and then head out through our entire galaxy and never end. That's our life. Our life is never going to end. We're eternal. And so the red on here represents our time on Earth and all of that. So what Job gets, he gets the fact that he's eternal and that God's in charge. He's not saying anything different about that. In fact, he said, why wasn't I stillborn? I'd already be in the white. Life would be good if I was just stillborn. I wouldn't have to go through all this. He's asking God, what's going on in the red? Why was I even born? It appears to me that I have no purpose in the red. If I look backward, if I look forward, everything's gone. I get it. I come into the red with nothing. I'm going out of the red with nothing. Inside the red, you give and you take away. Blessed be your name. That's what he said. But now he's saying, what's the sense of it anymore? Why am I still here? Why would you keep me alive in the red when this is going on? Healthy question. Why do I exist? Why do I still exist? Speak to me, God. God chooses to be silent because he's digging a little bit deeper with Job. He wants to dig something out of Job. He wants to help Job see something. Job's belief system is getting hit head on here. Here's what Job believed. If you do good, good things happen. If you do bad, bad things happen. There's an X, there's an X. There's an O, there's an O. Job is living with an X and an O. He's a good guy. God bragged on him. Blameless, upright, fear God, turn from evil. Why would this happen to me, God? Job's starting to realize some of his thinking is off. Maybe he doesn't know God quite the way he thought he knew God. Maybe God doesn't fit within that box that he described. And when we start looking at the conversation back and forth with the friends, we're going to see some great theology. They just didn't know how to apply it. And they thought they knew God. And God, in the end, lets them know who God really is. So, but we're still in this right now with Job, right? Paul tells us God has set eternity in our heart. The fact that all this white is who we are. We live forever. We've got a short little window here, which plays into all of this, right? But he set that in our heart. The question is, how do we react to really, really tough times? The times that really show who we are. How do you process bad things? Anger? Mad? Bitter toward God? Raise a fist and say, who are you? How could you do this? Or wax that softens and ask like Job, why? 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 Job, without question, was searching for wisdom. I put it in the going deeper. I encourage you to spend some time with it this weekend. But if you look at Job 28, 20 through 28, here's Job's heart. Where then does wisdom come from? Where does understanding dwell? He's still in the middle of it in Job 28. It is hidden from the eyes of every living thing, concealed even from the birds of the sky. Destruction and death say, we have heard a rumor about it. God understands the way to it, and he alone knows where it dwells. For he views the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When he established the force of the wind and measured out the waters, when he made a decree for the rain and a path for the thunderstorm, then he looked at wisdom and appraised it. He confirmed it and tested it. And he said to the human race, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. And to shun evil is understanding. Job is still fearing God when he's asking these type of questions. And guys, we're going to head to the tables and allow a little bit more time there this morning. But as we do, what we want to think about is this the type of relationship you want to have with God? How do you process when bad things happen? And do you go to God with this as a baseline, knowing, yeah, God designed everything, and he knows everything, and he is the source of wisdom, but I don't have that, and I want to know it. And so, God, I'm hurting right now. I don't get it. I want to know why she go through that? Why is this going on? What is the purpose? Is it something I did? Is it nothing I did? Is this somehow your will? Healthy conversations to have with God. A God who is not silent. And a God who gives us a Holy Spirit to work inside of us. A God who put eternity into our mindset so we can have hope even in the midst of the worst things. But sometimes we have to figure out the red, right? So how do we process that? How do you process when horrible things happen in your life? Are you one of the guys who becomes a professional curser? Or is your heart open and just bleeding out to God and is pulling you to a relationship with him far deeper than what you would ever have without it? All right, things to talk about at the table. We're going to give you a little more time, and we'll be back at 7:50. All right, let's pull it together. We're going to wrap up. So, question for you as we finish this quick look at Job 3. Question for you: Will God ever allow you to go through more than you can endure? What do you say, Maurice?
No, because the word says so.
Okay, Maurice says no because the word says so. Anybody else? Will God ever allow you to go through more than you can endure? Yes? Why? Yeah, so the word says he'll never tempt us above what we're beyond to handle, right? But as far as enduring, go ahead and grab your going deeper little fold there and turn it over to the back. Here's what Paul said in 2 Corinthians 1, verse 8. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself, more than they could endure. God allowed it. Why? Well, he tells us in the next verse. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. So one thing I would say that I'm getting from studying this book of Job over the summer is about the time we think we have God figured out, we don't have God figured out, right? But we just can know this about him. He is sovereign and he's in charge. And while we don't get what's going on in the red sometimes, it's healthy to ask, but he is in control. And so I've jotted down 5 takeaways from chapter 3. So let me just run through them real quick. Number 1, there are days too dark for the suffering to see light. Read the Psalms. David's heart crying out. Now, David brought some of that on himself, most of it on himself, right? But there were 2 days that are just too dark to see light sometimes. There are experiences too extreme for the hurting to have hope. Here. There are valleys too deep for the anguish to find relief on their own. Sometimes it just hurts so great, there is no relief. The pain's too great. Corrie ten Boom said this after being in the concentration camp and watching her sister die. There is no pit so deep that he's not deeper still. So there's only so much time that we have, on a Friday morning like this, but it's hard to look at a chapter 3 and just let it stand by itself. Guys, we all experience times like this, and the question is, how do we react and where are we going? And sometimes we get hit with a short thing. Pay attention to that. Sometimes that might be a little test God's giving you to find out where you're at right now. And if you're dropping F-bombs and that's the first place you're going, you got a heart issue, okay? You got something you got to let go of. You got to spend some time with him. Get with him. Get quiet with him. Get close. Walk close with God. We spur each other to do that. We have a God who is in control, and he does love us, and he is going to bring us along, and he does give us a helper, and he gives us the Holy Spirit so that we can live victorious lives, and that's where he wants us to live, because we all have a great impact in the places we live, the families that we have. Our greatest purpose is in our home. We also have great purpose at work and in our neighborhood and wherever he's planted you in the red for a short period of time. What do we want to make out of it, right? There's also, I put down number 5, some people get stuck and like to be victims. Now, don't go running home and say, dear, we talked about you this morning. But for some reason, this dynamic is true. Make sure it's not you. If you look at the Israelites, okay, you want to talk about a story. Now, look, Job got hit hard. He got hit hard. And he's a couple months into it here. How about a God who decides, I'm going to build my own nation. I'm going to have my children. And through them, I'm going to let the whole world know that I'm the one true God. And so he takes Joseph and on the surface destroys his life, right? At 17 years old, has him sold into slavery, Hutch is going to be walking us through that in the series on Joseph, what Joseph all went through and some things that we go through, how he reacted, what we can learn from that. But then Joseph's brothers follow him into Israel. All 12 tribes, all 12 families are established into Egypt, And then what? 430 years of slavery. How about being in the middle of that and saying, okay, God, Joseph brought us here. He's given us instructions when we go to the promised land to take his bones there to be buried with his forefathers. It's a little bit long. It's a little bit tough. My whole life, I've been a slave. How does a God who loves people do that? Except he was building a nation under the protection of Egypt. A brilliant plan if you step back and look at it. Nobody attacked them. They could grow like crazy. And what were they like? They kind of like becoming victims, right? The first thing they do is the first day out, they're by the Red Sea, they complain. We were better off in Egypt. Then they see the parting of the Red Sea. They see God's hand. And as soon as the water dries up, they start murmuring and complaining again. We're better off in Egypt. You bring us out here to die. Are you like that in any way? I mean, I think one of the beauties of studying a book like Job is to say, how much of me is in here? I mean, how much chiseling do I need? Am I going deep enough myself to letting God work on my character? Am I spending enough time with him on the bench, just me and him, talking with him, processing life? Do you long for that kind of relationship? It's there. It's right there for us. Jesus paid the whole price. What the only thing that blocks us is whatever sin you want to hang on to because you think that's going to make you happy. It ain't worth it. I lived it. I've been there. I've done that. It's like, don't, whatever it is, let it go. Let's use chapter 3 as a pause point to say, these are good questions to ask. Why am I here? Why was I born? Why am I still here? And God, how do you want to use me? And whatever it is that's blocking that kind of relationship between you and him, let it go. Confess it. Repent of it. Turn from it. Surrender it. And then live a victorious life. And take your pain and give it to him. All of it. Don't carry it. If there's any anger inside of you, deal with it. We're going to go to a pretty enlightening exchange between the friends. There's some theology that's put out. I mean, you talk about some guys that sat down together. Job pours out his heart, and he says, and his friend says, "You bag of wind. You done talking? Are you kidding me?" The guy's got boils from head to toe. They came to sympathize. They came to provide comfort, and you listen to it. But why? They started getting angry at each other because they felt like God was like this, and someone was saying they're not, and they started getting, and it was like, their emotions start getting out of control. But in the middle of that, they're saying some great things. If you take your gold and put it in the dust, God will become your gold. That is absolutely true. And the guy got chastised by God for saying it. Why? A little bit of judgment in there, wasn't there? Guys, relationship with God does not happen in the fast lane. As much as we would want it to. It's personal. It's your time in his word, listening to him. Part of my journey was gleaning too much from other people speaking and not falling enough in love with God's word. So I'm going to ask you, I ask it a lot, where are you at in your time in his word? Are you hungry for it? Does it speak to you? That's why he gave it to us. Make it a priority. This little bit of time here in that red, what's more important than our walk with God, understanding him, getting to know him on this side of it? It's the only time we're going to have an opportunity to do this before we see him face to face. We had a conversation at our table about the white a little bit. The white, the bright, what's that going to be like? I think we're going to go there in spring. There's I guess it's logical, right? If that's a true timeline, which it is, why wouldn't we want to know more about where we're headed, right? And the Bible is so rich on what it says. So I think in spring, maybe we'll do a series on heaven, maybe 4 or 5 weeks on what are we told about what that's going to be like? And how does that affect how we live here now, right? So, all right, Hutch is going to be back next week, and he's going to be running for a few weeks on Joseph. I've got some heavy travel ahead, but we're going to come back and wrap up Job right before Thanksgiving, actually, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I encourage you between now and then, spend some time in the book of Job. Read it. Read it twice. Mark it. Mark all over it. Questions. Checks. That hits me. Actually, I think about God like that. Am I off? Or was that actually true? Or how am I implying it? It's so rich. I mean, I never really understood the book of Job. It's the first time I've actually studied the book of Job to this level of depth. And the reason I did is because I started this summer very discouraged. I just thought, man, maybe there's something in here for me that I need to grab a hold of. And yeah, there was. And yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit too, but see what's in it for you. So I encourage you as you open up the Bible a little bit more, spend some time in Job between now and November when we're going to wrap this series up. All right, thanks. Close at your table. Yeah, you wanted the 5 again? Okay. There are days too dark for the suffering to see light. Days too dark for the suffering to see light. There are experiences too extreme for the hurting to have hope. There are valleys too deep for the anguish to find relief on their own. There's no pit so deep that he is not deeper still. And some people get stuck and like to be victims. All right, guys, close at your table. See you next week. Thanks.